Okay, so let us start the discussion of the building, winning digital customer experience in SME banking. And my first question to all of you will be about the digital onboarding. Pavel, that you showed how you implemented this in BNP Paribas. We will be talking about it a bit later. I will show it in my slides, but generally in the Central Eastern Europe, 15% of the banks implemented fully digital SME customers onboarding, meaning so no visits to the branch, no papers. So for me, this is a crucial start, let's say, of the online or digital journey for the customer, because many banks have start this at the branches where to open the account and to receive an access to the online banking, a customer should go to the branch. So what challenges do you see here from your point of view, each of you, and also how to overcome them, because we do have implementations, and Pavel, you shared with us your example here, because also, like, if we look at the change that we have compared to the previous year and compared to the start of the lockdowns, let's say, the change was really slight, like 2-3 banks added this in the CEE region. So what are the main challenges and how to overcome? Pavel, maybe you start.
Okay. I believe that there are at least 3 challenges. I'll start with the less important one, maybe, just to focus. The first one is, of course, the technological barrier. It's the less important one, but still it is. Mm-hmm. You have to implement some services. You have to integrate it, and I believe that's the clue. So, first one is the technology. The other one is connected to, let's say, to the regulations. I will speak only on behalf of Poland, of course, because I do not know the detailed, regulations in other countries, but. In Poland, we have, let's say, maybe I will just split it in 2. One are general regulations on providing or using the external services by banks. For example, it was mentioned here at the first session about the cloud. Mm-hmm. That in generally, not a single bank in Poland is using right now the public cloud because we can do it, but not a single one provider in the world can do it the way that our regulator told us to do. Of course, banks are trying to use the private cloud, but it's not the same. So this regulation makes it hard for us to implement certain solutions. For example, as it was said at the very beginning, China, United States are the areas where technology, let's say, evolves or expands fastest in area on machine learning, AI, and so on. And this is mainly done in cloud. That means that for Polish banks, using such technology or such providers is a huge burden, because for them, applying or being compliant with our regulations is just crazy. Yeah, they won't do it. They will invest those money in expanding their services to the other countries and offering in a standard way. So this is one obstacle. The other one in Poland are very strict regulations of our regulator here on remote identification for banks. And it's a simple recommendation. It has 4 pages. But again, I haven't seen a technology that is 100% compliant with it. So if banks decide in Poland to use for example, video biometrics, because you can use, of course, the qualified signature and things like that, but not everyone has it. So let's focus, for example, on video biometrics. So not a single technology covers 100% of them. And in general, you have to take the risk, to implement the technology, and banks do it. Okay, this one covers 90%. We assume that it's okay, but no one knows what will happen when the regulator will come. But you can not do it or do it with taking the risk on yourself. And this is the factor number 3. Banks, have quite a low appetite for risk. And when we talk internally with our internal partners, as we sometimes call them, the sad guys in the black suits. I'm of course joking. Our partners on operational risk area or compliance. When you talk with them about remote identification, they just see only the dark side. And in fact, when we do some things in the branch, they do not say there's a problem because the customer came there, maybe it's a scam, maybe he copied the ID, but we do it for 20 years, we know. Yeah, there's like 5% of the risk that we put there, but here, maybe it will be 95. So it's counterintuitive, but we make the remote process even more complex from their perspective. They want to make it even more complex and more secure than the one that we have, and we're okay with it. So this was one related to regulation and risk. And the most important one is perception. This word was mentioned also here, is the perception of the staff and the perception of the customers. So many customers just do not want to use it. Of course, there are certain groups of the customers, because all of you know the adoption curve, the early majority, late majority, and so on. But in general, the customers do not see the benefits.
How do you know this?
For example, we have this digital onboarding, but like 60 or 70% of the agreement at the very end are signed by the customer in paper. Because they want to have it in paper. They want to put it into a shelf and have it. That's the only reason. There is no other barrier. There's no legal barrier, technological barrier. It's only a psychological barrier, in their mind. Of course, COVID changed that a bit. Because we ask our relationship managers, why do you not sign, for example, overdraft agreements in a digital way? They say, customers won't accept it. We say to you, okay, maybe they're lying. Yeah, because maybe they have, the barrier is on their side. So we ask the customers, and they said the same. No, it's overdraft, it's money. I have to give it back to you. So I want to have it in paper. Of course, not everybody does it, but this is how it worked. Of course, COVID changed that, and really showed that it was mainly a psychological barrier, because then, let's say, the scare of meeting with other person when you can get ill, things like that, was bigger than this barrier. And the customer found out it's not so scary to use digitalized signed document. But still, I believe the psychological barrier, the perception, is the key obstacle right now.
Yes,
I would maybe add to these points, and I quite like the structure, but let me maybe add a few perspectives also looking from outside of Poland, because for Poland we should always look when looking at the CE that it is one of the markets that's maybe more advanced. We started here developing certain things earlier. It's more easier now to discuss certain things with the regulator. It's more easier for the customers to see value, etc., etc. But just maybe adding those on the points mentioned by Pavel, but adding different flavor, let's say. First one on the technology. I agree that technology is not an issue. Yeah, what is an issue, or what is a challenge, probably a better word, is there's so much to do on the technology front, supporting different solutions, different ideas, etc., etc. That is not a matter of skills, it's a matter of availability of skills. And now even more so. I've seen a study somewhere that until now there was a certain number of IT solutions being built over the last 50 years, yeah. But then looking at the next 10 years, yeah, 5 times shorter period, the number of the new solutions will be 10 times bigger, yeah, and that shows the demand. So it's not the skills, it's, I would say, the availability of skills on the technology. Adding to the point on the regulatory issues. Yes, in all the countries, I can say that in all the countries that the discussions are quite similar, that often the regulators are waiting for the first use cases, looking more lenient on them, and then maybe adjusting their viewpoints, etc. So there is a certain learning curve also for the regulators, and they are waiting even for the first adopters to maybe take some risk, and only then they will have the adjusted the recommendations. We do a lot of discussions, work with the regulators on how to find a sweet spot for certain things around the cloud, around the data privacy, etc. On the third point, culture, and this was also cooperation of business, yeah, I would just add a point here that this is very much connected to the goals that are set for the organization. And of course, in my presentation, I focus more business and IT, that we should take more risk when implementing new solutions. It's about build fast, fail fast. But when we add to that mix the black ties guys, yeah, the black suits guys, compliance, lawyers, risks, their KPIs are set completely differently. And the key to overcome that going forward is how to change the organizational setup so that we are working towards one goal, one OKR across the competencies, and that those guys also have the benefit, they also have the motivation to look for the ideas how to move that client away from the branch, not how to keep that client in the branch, because it's much, much safer for them. And I would say here it's a task for the organization to transform themselves. And on the last point on adoption for the end customer, because we should never forget about the end customer. Here I would say the situation is quite different across the CE markets. And we need to remember that CE is quite specific as a region. It's quite heterogeneous. We have bigger countries, but we have a lot of smaller countries, for example, in Balkan area. And for a lot of those countries, the ability to see the customer in the branch, especially that, a lot of those people also, know each other. This is a, further relative, etc., etc. Yes. This is more a community society, as Jolana phrased it now. So there is also certain, willingness from the bank's perspective to have that customer in the branch. They believe that there is more business to be done if we're talking to that person. And even if we open enable the fully digital process in those countries, at the beginning the adoption will be quite low. So I'm not saying that the banks shouldn't do it, because we across of our banks either are actively working on it, or in some banks have it in the pipeline. But it just takes time, because it's also not only about the technology, but there are certain things that just takes time, like culture, regulatory risks. So that I would just maybe add to Pavel's points.
Yes. Maybe just one more comment on that. From the colleagues, I believe we are probably not in the phase that we are closing the branches. That's probably something that's going to happen in next few years. I think it's a standard way. Maybe 2 comments. One of the technology. Maybe one thing I'd like to add on that. I mean, I absolutely agree that the technology is not an issue from the point of view of delivery, but maybe from the usage perspective. And I believe that what can probably, or what I would, let's say, maybe support guys from the banking is if they can help to educate the end users in terms of using it, supporting with some kind of marketing campaigns and communication, because the technology is something that people have sometimes, let's say, are kind of scared of in some way. So adding to the technology, the communication is something that is helping a lot from what I've seen in the past. And maybe in terms of the regulation, I see this as a somehow issue as well, but it's somehow changing. For example, in Europe, I believe all what's been done with PSD2 by opening APIs, it's something that is helping the let's say digital onboarding processes, because to be honest, 80% of the customers is already somewhere onboarded. So really the idea of reusing it is probably makes sense somehow. The other way is it's being really used. But where I see some of the light is also in the additional initiatives that the European Union has in terms of probably digital ID that probably will be the topic in next 2 years. So that's something I believe that this could help a bit in terms of the usage of the market.
I would just maybe add one point to that, because there is actually a favorable factor in terms of, let's say, educating the client. Because if we're talking about micro and SME, this is in a very simplified term, this is the second one to follow. So a lot of the people responsible in the SME companies for onboarding into the bank, they went through that process as a retail customers. So this is just, I would say, a natural, next step in that line. There is still, and I had while preparing for that meeting, I had the discussions with our SME heads in 2 of the countries, and they mentioned that it's not that they are worried for those guys not being able to go through the process. They already went through the process. It's just that when they are, putting on their not an individual person hat, but the, business owner hat, chief accountant, whoever,
Sure.
the approach to this changes a bit. There are internal regulations in the company. You need to have contracts for something, etc., etc. So, it just also takes time on their side to realign on the hats, let's say.
Yes, but what I would like to add here is that SME customers really, during the last 2 years, started to expect from the banks to have this digital experience the same as they have as private individuals. This is actually the change which was not seen earlier. Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to comment on that, because that will be a bit side remark, because I cover also the corporate banking, but I believe that can be a good example, because still the chief accountant or the head of treasury on one side is using Uber and Facebook,
Yes.
on the other side he's the chief treasury in a big company. And you have to have a hybrid approach, I believe, also in the upper SME segment, because, for example, somehow you have to focus on products, because when it's a tailored product, complicated and so on, even for SME customer, the customer experience is less important. It's important to, it's always important, but maybe it's such a complex product that only 2 or 3 banks can do. And the source of the competitive advantage here can be the same product, because we can do it, nobody else can do it, yeah? But on the other hand, when the same guy calls you and wants to block the business card, or wants to add his business card to his Google Apple Wallet, he expects from you the very same user experience as in retail banking, yeah? And that's a challenge, yeah? Because you have to be in 1 minute on that side, and on the other minute on the other one. And maybe one more remark about the identity, because we talked about the identity of a person. But the problem sometimes happens, not very often, but still it can happen, especially in the mid-market and the corporate, when we have international companies. Because we have the, let's say, identity of the person, but at the very same time, if we have a commercial company, we also, let's call it identity of the company. For example, in Poland, this is very, very simple, because we have the electronic register of the companies. We go there and we see that the 2 representatives of the company are Paweł Jaszewski and Michał Kierowski. They have certain statistical number, and they jointly can represent the customer. And we do not need anything more. If we then identify Paweł Jaszewski and Michał Kierowski, this is everything that we need. But in a number of countries in Europe, it is not that simple. So in order to have it, you have to analyze, for example, the company agreement, or go to the notary, or do other stuff. Yeah. So I read that there is let's an approach in European Union to create also, let's say, a kind of regulation on identity of the companies. Yeah. So this will also, let's say, help to break some barriers, not only in banking, but in any other, let's say, spaces. Because it is the issue of signing a contract with any third party, not only a bank.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I had here the question in the chat from John, that are digital identity technologies adequately supported in the regulatory environment? I think you answered this question.
I would say in Poland too much.
Okay. And yes, if to go, maybe I will comment a bit about culture. Pavel, if you remember 2 years ago at our conference, we discussed with John Mark Williams, we had a discussion on the innovative culture in the company and how to build it. And this was, I have a feeling actually that really in some banks, the stopper for the digitalization or innovation is their culture and this mindset of the workers, mainly because they are safe in this and what they have, and their excuses, the customer do not want this, but let the customers choose maybe. Give them a choice that they want to come to the branch or to do everything digitally. And yes, and we discussed that, yes, that the banks, as they're big companies, corporates, they behave very often, but I see this is changing and this is good. But standardly, they behave, as a government, that the project is started, the project cannot be failed or just ended with no results inside the bank, and there is no permission to fail. Like, for example, startups. Startups has this mindset that we can start, we try, if it fails, okay, lesson learned, we go further. And this mindset, I think this should be crucial in the banks to really have this. So all the employees and all the teams should have this right to start the project and to fail and go further, because this is the environment for the innovations in such big companies as banks. We have another question from Agata in the online chat. How the customer satisfaction score changed after implementing digital onboarding in BNP? Have you tracked it?
We've tracked it, but I do not remember. I must answer it frankly right now, because we implemented like 2 years ago. But maybe I'll give you another figure because I have it in my head. Before implementing of this integrated process, the number of returns in the process. So when someone in the third back office team at the very end find that something is missing, and the onboarding had to return to the relationship manager, in fact, was 98%. So only 2% of the documentation of the processes ended within the first walkthrough. Right now it's over 70%, yes? So it's like 60 times, 30 times better, yes? So of course, sometimes at the very end, the back office team finds something, that the customer, make a remark on the document and we have to check where is it. But from 2% to the 70%, of course, it's a huge change. And also, it also means that the lead time was significantly reduced.
Thank you. The next question from Balint. To what extent can KYC be automated for SME customers? We have examples when it can be automated to 100%. But as I mentioned, as a KYC is a part of the online onboarding process, so 15% of the banks in the CE region have it. Maybe you can add something.
I would maybe, it's hard to answer that question because it's, and I always have to look from multiple markets perspective. In the situation that we have in Poland with the electronic registry, probably to some extent this is easier. SMEs, there is a bit different requirements in KYC in terms when comparing to, I don't know, large corporates. So to some extent, so in Poland I would say yes, yeah. But the difficulty is in all the other markets. In some markets like Czech Republic, this is possible as well. But I think, Olena, your percentage, and this is maybe my lucky guess. Maybe you will tell me I'm wrong, but this is also quite. This is 15% across the CE, across certain number of banks. But yeah. I bet that this is accumulated in probably, I don't know, 2-3 countries. And I think
you're right.
And I think this is of course does not mean one-to-one that, I don't know, in Romania, Serbia, Kosovo, we cannot have this process automated. But it means that there are still some hurdles along the way. But maybe just a lucky guess, but it seems like I was lucky.
Yeah.
Maybe I try also to briefly comment on that. It's the nature of the question is, what is your, let's say, appetite for risk? Yeah, because is it higher, is it lower? I completely agree with what Michał said. If we had one-person business activity, if we had a limited company in Poland, we can do it fully automatically. Of course, beside the cases that, someone has a name which is, let's say, constant, just the same as the name of a publicly exposed person and so on, because we have to check it. And then the question would be, would we want to invest a lot of money in building very, very complicated AI mechanism to exclude it? Or is it better in one on 100 cases just to person to look on that and say, no, the birth date is not the same, because so he's not a publicly exposed person. But the biggest challenge from my perspective are the rules on identifying by the bank the ultimate beneficial owner. And this is, again, the case related to the registry of the companies. If the structure is simple, you can do it. But when the structure is complex, you have to, be a detective. And you have to look in number of sources and so on. And for multinational companies or even certain type of local companies, when you look at those rules, it is not possible because you will not find this data in a structured form anywhere. And you have to confirm it. Yeah. So I believe that is one of the biggest challenges. of course, there has become a central registry of the beneficial owners in Europe, in Poland. But in Poland, it's a funny thing. The aim was to help banks, but it was created. But the only company that is responsible, the only party that is responsible for writing the data there is the customer. So customer says, my ultimate beneficial owner is Paweł Jaszewski. But on the other hand, according to the law, bank is obliged to check it in the independent source. So central registry of the beneficial owners has no benefit from the bank because data there is not put by, the registry court or any other, let's take, external partner, but the same customer provides it there. And the statement of the customer is just not enough according to the law.
Maybe
Yes,
can we
Professor.
say in general there is a link between the level of e-government services and the level of e-banking?
Yes, and also I would probably add to Michal's comment that yes, that these digital solutions now for SMEs are really concentrated in 2-3 countries here in the CE, but also this is connected with with a number of active SMEs here in the region. Yeah, because if we start and we say that yes, Poland now at the moment is the most innovative one in this area, this also explains that here we have 2 million active SMEs. The next country is Czech Republic. And we see also that yes, the digitalization is developing there. And other countries in the region, there are several times less, like Romania, 300,000. So this is also, maybe in these countries when banks also see the market, that the SME is a real market and a customer segment for them, this conversation with governmental bodies are also more active than in other countries. And this pushes also the requirements, regulations as well.
Yeah, so this is just, thankfully, and I'm super happy about that, backs up what I said, that the issue is not on the technology, because the same technology can be used in Poland, Romania, etc. But it's just a matter of having the priority for that topic. And the priority is connected or strongly linked with the revenue pool that you can tap into. And then this also means that you start certain discussions with the regulator earlier, on the other countries, maybe you discuss something else, before you start discussing SME onboarding topic.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe, Michał, I can have a question to you because it just appeared in my head because what Joanna said in general is quite obvious because when you have a small country, you have a small, let's say, population of the customers, and more or less the cost of implementation of a given solution is not related to the scale of the number of customers. Whether it's Poland or it's Kosovo, if you want to apply a given solution, it costs you a number of money. So I believe the Raiffeisen is a great, let's say, example here because you service the bigger countries, the smaller countries, and you represent the group IT. Maybe you could elaborate on that a bit.
Of course, happy to. And I think I will repeat this most common word I mentioned on the presentation, which is reuse. Because the problem is that as much as we can expect a positive business case of implementing a fully fledged digital SME onboarding in Russia, huge market, big revenue pool to tap into, then spending that amount of money in, you mentioned Kosovo, this will definitely not bring a positive business case. So for us, the tricky part is how to look at the markets which are very, very heterogeneous from the culture, regulations, standpoint perspective, how to look at them and how to try to reuse certain things. And I will be saying it like a mantra because we really do say reuse as a mantra. The solution is how to identify an external provider, how to do a pilot in one of the country, but always having in mind, is it flexible enough? Is it, scalable enough? Is it easy to integrate enough so that we can also use it for the other markets? And that makes a completely different discussion because we'll never now look at the particular solution from the one market perspective, but we always would like to do some quick study, quick check also how there's the fit for the other markets.
Yeah.
Maybe, Elena,
Sure.
Are you planning the research for next year as well?
Of course.
Because I would be quite keen, because, for example, in the Czech Republic, we have the initiative of Bank ID, that a number of banks have agreed to create a joint vehicle that should enable using the identity services. And this may help, one of the crucial benefits that should help us quite significantly not only using it, but also in the onboarding procedures. So I'm really just keen to see how the numbers will change for next
Of course,
year.
we will discuss it next year during the conference. Do we have questions in the room? Any? Okay, we have one in the online chat from Josef. How to manage, I think, Michal, this will be primarily to you, how to manage any friction between the supporters of the reuse of internally developed modules or components versus other supporting outsourcing and integration when the product to market horizon is shorter, and the pressure from the business units is harder.
That's quite a complex question. But to be honest, I would not say that outsourcing and reuse are excluding solutions, we can call it, because we can have one outsourcer that then is being reused across the country. So reuse is much more on how we utilize certain things and whether we think always having the big picture in mind. It's not that it automatically implies that we need to build something ourselves and then think how to reuse it, because a lot of our solutions that we put in for the reuse are either brought externally. Sometimes they are built internally, but sometimes this is just a software as a service from the external providers. It's not a pure outsourcing, of course, but this is some sort of heavier reliance on the external partner. And how to manage that? And this is again coming back to what I said earlier. Our business in all the countries, there is a significant pressure on how to innovate, how to implement new things. And we already have a real case example, how much faster and how much cheaper it is that instead of purchasing certain solutions 14 times, in each country doing the procurement process, in each country doing the assessment of the solutions, then the implementation, building the necessary APIs, dealing with all the backends changes, product adjustments, etc., but doing it 14 times, versus jointly, and this is I think key answer, jointly business, IT, but across the group, whoever is interested, select a partner, and then with that partner, have a bigger partnership. Don't manage 14 partners. Have one partner on which you can more rely on, but with that partner, build a competence center with your IT, with their IT, with a mixed team who can jointly work that the solution is, operating on one APIs. And we have the same, let's say, endpoints on our side. That when we are talking about designing the customer journey, that maybe this is not 14 customer journeys. There are some, of course, differences in the country, but maybe this is 4 or 5 archetypes of the customer journey. When we're talking that there is a product, let it be one product, not 14 products, but maybe one product with certain customization in it. And this is fine. This is referring to this Volkswagen Group example. They are also not building for each car separate suspension, separate gearbox, etc. They're thinking how to build something jointly that it can be utilized further. So we actually completely don't have any pressure or any problems with business on reusing things. They are even co-driving this with us because they see the value in time to market and the cost spent for developing such solutions.
We have another question from Agata in the online chat. Are there customers that prefer not to use digital onboarding, and how many? Of course. Pavel, and also maybe my next question here before I answer, what is your target on the digital customer onboarding for the next year? Do you have one?
We do not have, let's say, a target on the total end-to-end digital onboarding. We have targets in, let's say, sub-targets in areas that are very important to us. Maybe I'll start with what I just briefly mentioned before, because what I do for many years is I tackle change management. And when you have a change or innovation many years ago also covered things like diffusion innovations and so on. So as I said, all of us knew the adoption curve. Yeah. So there's a certain group of consumers or users of given technology that, or potential users maybe I should say, that will never adopt it. Yeah, or will adopt it in a quite late stage. There's small at the very beginning. And the question the bank should ask is whether we want to service all the customers. So we need to give a choice to the right side of the curve to do it otherwise or not. So let me give an example. We, for example, do not want to service in BNP our customers that go to a branch and make a payments in branch. We don't want it because costs connected to servicing of those customers is just higher than revenues on those customers. Yes, so when you look at the 100% of the population, it means that our target population is right now only 90%. Then we ask ourselves whether a customer who does everything online but only goes to a branch for opening an account, is it okay for us? Yes, it is. Because still the cost related to opening of this account is much smaller than the revenues that we can have on digitally onboarding him. But we have some targets. For example, we have a target for SME that 90% of our customers will use the digital onboarding tool. I'm not saying that they will sign the documents at the end digitally, but this is a KPI for each and every relationship manager that 90% of the customer that he onboards in each year has to be onboarded through that tool. Of course, again, it's not a 100% because it will be stupid. Yeah, because we will find the customers that will not use the service, and especially in Poland, BNP Paribas is very strong in rural areas.
Yes.
We quite heavily focus on food and agro segment, and they can be. This segment is specific, and maybe they would like to have, let's say, paper documentation, or we have companies from the public sector again, and so on and so on. So we focus mainly on promotion, of course, among the customers. We also provide to the customers by our third-party providers qualified electronic signatures and things like that. They can get us from the bank, in fact. Yeah, so we help them. And we want this rate to be higher, but we do not have a specific target for the end-to-end digital process because it will be just harmful, for us as a bank.
Michal, do you have some kind of targets in this area?
I have to say I'm not aware of those being set for the countries. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But having based on what I said earlier, I think for a lot of those countries is first to the immediate target is to build a solution, to build a process. Only then, when we can have some tangible effects, we can start measure it. We can then try to optimize it going forward. But I agree with Pavel that we should never ever try to tap into every client. And I also don't think that we should, at the very beginning, at least for us, measure the full digital onboarding, because quite often there's and this is a sort of learning curve that we were mentioning earlier. It's much better to, let's say, start with digitally supported process with some parts of the process in the branch, and then only slowly switching to the fully digital process, because if we make a jump from 0 to hero, that might be quite difficult. There will be a lot of learnings that we will not do along the way, and that might harm us. And generally, we should work iteratively and rather not from 0 to a complete solution. Yeah, but there are certain stages that we should do.
Well, from our studies and feedbacks from the banks, the average target, let's call it the average target in the CE market is to have during the nearest year or 2 years, 50% of the customer onboarded online. But of course, we have banks like in Poland, Pavel, you mentioned 90% figure. And last year, I remember also the figures and the statistics from the ING Bank in Poland. And they showed that they had 98% of the business customers onboarded digitally during the lockdown. So this number is almost 100%. I mean, of course, this was a specific period of time. Also, they had this implemented. So yes, but average is 50 here on the market. Okay, do we have any questions here in the room? Okay, not so. Then my final one to the panel will be: how do you cooperate with the business lines? What is the setup? Do you have an agile structure? Do you use it? And who also maybe initiates these implementations in your organizations?
So I can maybe start. I'll try to keep it short. Yes, like of course, we have to work with business, and as I mentioned earlier, the lines, even who is business and who is IT, are getting super blurry. We do work in agile setups. We do a lot of cloud implementation, and I'm mentioning cloud because we do perceive cloud as a agile tool for agile teams. It's much easier for agile teams to build on cloud than an on-prem, because you can focus much more on people working like developers, product owners, etc., rather than also thinking about your underlying infrastructure. Who is initiating the cooperation? Again, often together, and I will give you an example. I do have counterparties on the business areas, which are probably much more knowledgeable, much more skilled in a certain IT topics, simply because they already went through certain implementations, they learned along the way. Or also, this is a strategy for us, that we do a lot of, let's say, cross-hirings, that quite often we hire in a business person coming with the IT background to help to bring that different culture, different spirit, so that we can talk the same language. But the same works the other way around. That in IT we do have people with more business background, and I'm one of those, one of the examples. So it's hard for me to say how we cooperate or who is initiating it, because this is getting super transparent for me. We do sit together. We do have the same conversations. Then all the targets are on us jointly. So there are no lines anymore.
Mm-hmm. Pavel, do you have the same?
Okay, it's a dangerous subject, because as you know, I'm a huge Agile fan and ambassador, and I could spend the rest 2 days talking about Agile. So maybe I'll start with a small remark, because it was somehow connected to my presentation, because today we talk mainly on, let's say, digital experience, but let's take it a bit broader and look at the customer experience. So if you want to be customer experience centric, and if you want to focus on the customer experience, you have to be aware that the customer experience changes, or customer expectations. It evolves very fast today. So if you want to compete on that level, and you want to be good at it, there is no end point. You will not say, okay, to be winner in this competition, I have to do this, and that, and you implement a traditional waterfall approach, and you say in 3 years, I've done it. I'm the ultimate winner, because the target changes every day. So as the customer experience is constantly changing, focusing or competing on level of customer experience is a process itself. Mm-hmm. So you have to try to approach it in a way that is flexible. Mm-hmm. And 3 examples, yeah? The best possible start, this is what the fintechs do, is to start with service design. You don't have any legacy and so on. Yeah. You just talk with the customers, find a solution, prototype, fail or not, let's say refine and implement. That's the best possible solutions. Not many banks can do it. Sometimes you can, but it's in a specific space. The other tool that can help you, of course, is the design thinking, because once you have a journey, it's quite good or quite bad, but we have it and you want to reinvent it, mm-hmm. you just do it. But so for a given moment of time, you know what to do in a very short perspective, but then you have to implement it. And to implement it, I believe, there's no better solution than the Agile framework here, because both Agile values, which are, let's say, about courage, about constant change, about customer before the rules and things like that, Agile rhythm and Agile structure, of course. And in BNP Paribas, and this digital onboarding is an example of it, since 2016 in my area, and since this year in the whole group, we are working fully agile in agile scale model. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the responsibility is clear. So for a given area or product, whatever we'll call a product, I mean an agile product, not a banking product, the person responsible for the vision is the product owner. And the execution is done by multitask squads, which cover both business and IT. And as I said, I work in a smaller scale since 2016 in that space. And of course, the final decision is made by the product owner, but he's not the smartest guy in the room. He shouldn't be. He should be the one who is the best listener and has the courage to make the decisions. And what Michal said is that when I look at my people, especially my product owners, most of them have a business background. Me also, because I'm responsible for the business transformation. I come from the business area, and I look at them when they were. Most of them were just product managers before this 2016, and the way that their knowledge about IT and awareness of certain things evolved is just fantastic. The same thing is among the I think people from IT. Even DevOps engineers, when they cooperate, they see the customer, and this is the huge challenge, that you do not have to ask such a question, who decides, because the team decides. And they all have, let's say, some, of course, they compensate in the level of skills they have, but in general, if they work long enough, they also have, let's say, a set of common skills and values. They can do it by themselves, okay? If there's an issue, there's the product owner to decide, but you do not differentiate whether it's IT or business. It's the team.
Okay. Václav, do you use Agile in your organization?
Yeah, we kind of started with the let's say transformational kind of 3 years ago. I must say I was quite skeptical about the benefits, and to be honest, I was wrong, because the truth is what Paul has been saying about. It's the changing the technology so fast, and the client expectations or the needs are changing as well. So it's hard to keep track, and you need to adapt during the time. So that was kind of a challenge that I must say that currently with the setup we have internally, it's great that the team has adapted quite a lot. What I see as a few challenges, maybe 2 challenges. There needs to be strong support from the management to, let's say, help with the strategy and help with the teams to, let's say, to support the goals. And maybe one of the things I would like to maybe see, get the feeling from colleagues, maybe what we face quite a lot is also we're trying to create teams with our customers. To create separate teams or dedicated teams to help with some specific projects. And it was maybe my question, if you guys have the experience in, let's say, creating joint teams with the vendors. Do you do that, or do you, let's say, create dedicated teams, or how do you approach that challenges?
Yes, of course we have the experiences, and I'm a great fan of this, because at the end of the day, why would we exclude the possibility of tapping into an extra talents, extra experts? So it's just for me the matter of how to build the OKRs, the goals, how to set the direction, right, so that we know that all the parties are pulling into the same direction. But we are strong advocates of working closely, and this is also what I mentioned earlier, that we do look for the partnership so that we can have, partner being with us, setting up dedicated teams. We can have a set of dedicated teams for that partner. They are, sitting together, working together, because if we have a huge challenge ahead of us in terms of, BPMs across the group, CBSs across the group, cloud across the group, then why would we try to do it like we do it, and we try to buy some service? It's much more difficult to specify what the service is, and then request it every time some statement of works and all this stuff. Much easier is to have a joint agreement of this is where we are, these are the targets we want to tap into in a certain period of time, and let's work on this together. We don't know it probably any better than I don't know, your teams, what's the best way. So
maybe the challenge for me was always the teams are trying to get, in some cases they may to tend to some shortcuts that would rather be against some kind of strategic goal, which is, let's say, more far away. So this is maybe for me a challenge to the product owners or probably for the managers. I'm just having the idea how to, let's say, balance that.
I believe it's a very good question, and maybe as on the target architecture, also the books can be written on that, I believe. But it's a fair question because doing agile in general, it's not easy. When you start it, when you learn it, and you have a learning curve, you have to change. Especially, I mean, agile is not by doing waterfall in shorter sprints and sitting people in one room. Yeah, the biggest change is a mindset change. And what Michał said, you have to. The OKR has to support it, the manager has to support it, and so on. So it's even a change in organization. From my experience, I went through 2 major agile at scale transformation. Takes like 6 months to 1 year when you start to see the benefits. Before they're not there because people just have to learn how to do it. So for a very short time they're just underperforming. And to answer directly your question, yes, of course we do cooperate with external vendors also in Agile framework. And there are, I believe, 2 main challenges each and every time. It's not a challenge of a single person, developer, analysts, UX designer, because when he becomes a part of the team, he's a part of the team, and you do not differentiate. And those people do not, let's say, perform better or worse from our people or our body shoppers or HR people. I mean, people that we hire directly. But there are 2 issues. The first one is who is the product owner, because such a person has a product owner from the bank side who tells everyone what's the vision and they cooperate. On the other hand, he has a manager in his company, yeah, and their goals can be sometimes not the same ones, yeah. So that's the one issue, and the other I believe, which is much more important, is about the money. Because in general, the vendors, the agreement that you have to create with the vendor has to support the agile way of working. Because especially for the big vendors, before you just prepared the business requirements and then they said it costs you 1 million zlotys. Yes, you didn't know how many days of working it costs. Yeah, for example, it costed them, I don't know, 600,000 zlotys, and 400,000 zlotys is just the margin, the premium. I don't know. I'm not an expert in it, but you do not see it. When you start working agile, you have to find a good compensation model, and you have to reflect into the agreement that the both sides will be happy. Because, of course, you cannot pay the same money in agile mode because you as a bank take the risk that the company, this person makes a mistake. If a vendor on, let's say, on traditional contract makes some mistakes, I paid 1 million zloty for the working solution. And it's a clear mistake. And you do not care that they spent 1.5 million zlotys on the solution. When it's agile, you pay for each and every, for example, day of work of that person. So, it just has to be somewhere regulated. So, of course, there are, so this is mainly, I believe, a mutual agreement between 2 companies and something that has to be very good reflected into the agreement between the vendor and the bank. And in fact, in Poland, I know there are at least 3. There are some, let's say, specialized legal firms that have high quality and help to negotiate such conditions. Yeah, you have to have the good knowledge because it's not an easy thing, but it's achievable, of course.
Just maybe shortly adding, because Pavel, what you said is exactly the sort of challenges we were facing, but this is exactly also the reason why I said earlier, we would much rather have one bigger partner across the topics when we went through the commercials once, when we have certain processes in place, how the onboarding of new people looks like, what's the quality, what say we have in the recruitment of certain people, rather than being in a business of managing partners. We're not in the business of managing partners. We're in the business of developing things together. Yeah? And it's for the product owner, it should be fairly transparent at the end of the day.
Okay. Thank you very much for this panel. Paweł Jaszewski, Michał Kurowski, Wacław Młodenko. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. Thank you.